On the night between February 21st and 22nd, 2015, this 19-year-old woman, Toveet Radcliffe, became the first African Hebrew and the first African American to die while serving in the Israel Defense Forces. For nearly an entire year, the Israeli army would not tell her family who was responsible for her death. After 11 months, the army submitted to Toveet's family a report claiming that no other person was involved in her death. In other words, the Israeli army claims that Toveet took her own life. But Toveet's family and friends say that she was a happy person and that she had no reason to take her own life. They asked the army to see its investigation materials. 3.5 weeks later, the army complied, leaving the family with just 1 month to review all the material before the IDF closes the case for good. An examination of these materials reveals serious failures by the Army's Criminal Investigation Division, evidence that is contradictory, evidence that has been tampered with, and evidence that has been censored. This video will briefly examine some of the worst examples, starting with the contradictory evidence. According to the Army report, Toveet died while she was guarding in a booth in the interior of an Army base in the interior of the country. The report states that Toveet died from a gunshot wound from a single bullet that entered her forehead and exited the bottom of the back of her skull. The report states that Toveet was shot to death by her own weapon, a shortened M16 rifle. The Army did not bother to employ the services of a scene expert to explain how Toveet might have died, so we'll have to figure out the scene for ourselves. According to the Army report, Toveet was found facing forward in a booth whose interior measured 140 centimeters from front to back. As she was shot in the forehead, she would have had to have been located behind the rifle, which measures 81 centimeters. Toveet herself stood 158 centimeters tall, and the Army report states that after passing through Toveet's head, the bullet that killed her became lodged in the door behind her, 122 centimeters above the ground, entering the door at an angle of between 95 to 100 degrees. If Toveet had been standing, the bullet would have gone through her neck. If she had been sitting, the bullet would have passed over her head. And this is true no matter how far back in the booth she was situated. For the bullet to have passed through Toveet's head, she would have had to be crouching slightly. Furthermore, the Army autopsy proposes that Toveet's left hand was holding the barrel of the rifle up to her forehead, leaving her right hand to pull the trigger. In this case, since the rifle was reversed, she would have had to push the trigger. If we accept the facts of the case, as per the IDF report, we are left with a number of serious contradictions. Number 1. From behind the barrel, Toveet's arms were not long enough to have physically reached the trigger. She could not possibly have shot herself in this manner. Number 2. If Toveet's left hand had been holding the barrel of the rifle, gunpowder and burn marks would have been found on her hand. Neither were. Number 3. No blood or tissue from Toveet's head was found sprayed on the door that Toveet had been standing directly in front of. Number 4. If the rifle had been fired in the manner that the Army asserts, it would have kicked back forcefully into the window of the security booth. After the incident, however, the booth window showed no signs of cracking. Number 5. Toveet's lifeless body was first found in the security booth, sitting down on a chair, pulled up close to the table in front of her. If Toveet had shot herself in the manner that the Army says that she did, she would have dropped down where she stood, at the back of the booth. Even if she had done as they say and dropped down into a chair, how would that chair have moved forward on its own without anyone's help? Part 2. Evidence tampering. The case files reveal many examples of evidence tampering. Not all of these examples can be discussed in this forum. 2 glaring examples will suffice for now. Just hours after the incident, Toveet's body was examined by a police pathologist. The pathologist notes that by the time Toveet's body arrived at the police station, it had already been washed. This is highly suggestive of an attempt to erase evidence. Also, the Army autopsy report records Toveet's height from foot to head as 172 centimeters. That's 5 foot 8 inches in imperial measurements. In fact, Toveet's actual height was 158 centimeters, or 5 foot 2, half a foot shorter than that. Why would the Army try to exaggerate Toveet's physical dimensions? Perhaps in order to lend credence to the theory that Toveet had long enough limbs to reach the rifle trigger and shoot herself backwards? But the most damning evidence of all is the evidence that the IDF chooses to censor. According to the Army report, this is the sequence of events on the night of February 21st, 2015. At 8 p.m., Toveet started a guard duty shift in the security booth. At 9:20 p.m., other soldiers walked by the booth and talked to her. At about 10:20 p.m., another soldier walked by the booth and the two waved to one another. Then, at a minute or two after midnight, the soldier who goes to replace Toveet on guard duty finds her lifeless body sitting in the security booth. But wait! Buried deep in the Army investigation materials, another report emerges. The testimony of another soldier on the base, Soldier S. This soldier states that about 10:45 p.m., he passes by the booth and sees no one in it. About a minute or two later, he hears a gunshot, but doesn't know what to make of it. About a half hour later, at approximately 11:15 p.m., he returns to his commander, who tells him that a soldier on the base has committed suicide. He then gets a call from the base command central and is again told that a soldier on the base has committed suicide and is asked to remain on duty until midnight. As soon as the Army investigators took the soldier's testimony, it should have questioned the base commanders to learn what they knew about the actual circumstances of Toveet's death, when they came to know it, and how they came to know it, before her dead body was supposedly discovered for the first time at midnight. Instead, they interview no new subjects and quickly close the case. When they author the official Army report, they eliminate any reference to this Soldier S, his testimony, and its far-reaching implications. The testimony of Soldier S and the decision to cover it up reveal that the base commanders knew of Toveet's death well before midnight. Therefore, the discovery of Toveet's body at midnight could not have been a surprise. Rather, it turns out to have been staged theater, scripted to explain away Toveet's death as a suicide so that the real circumstances of her death could be covered up. This Sunday, March 27th, 2016, the Israeli Army will close its investigation into the death of Toveet Radcliffe, unless Toveet's family and friends appeal the Army's decision in time.